Welcome back to Roaming with Restless Women. Today I have Michele Hollow. Michele works as a journalist, an author, and a ghostwriter with a focus on health, wellness, autism, aging, climate, pets, wildlife, and lifestyle. That's quite a list. Her byline has appeared in the New York Times, AARP, and Next Avenue. She works as a reporter, an editor, and a ghostwriter for various organizations, including a national nonprofit that helps homeless families. With a bachelor's degree in journalism, Michele has a strong background in developing content, researching, writing, and editing articles. Her middle grade book, called Jurassic Girl, was published in September 2024 by Ulysses Press, and it is about Mary Anning. Mary Anning's first major fossil find in 1811 was when Mary was only 12 years old. Of course, back then, the men in the scientific community couldn't even imagine a girl or any female could make such a find, but she triumphed. And today she's known as the mother of paleontology. You can find out more about Michele and Jurassic Girl in my show notes at the end of the episode. Welcome, Michele. I'm so happy that you're here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Sure. So let's start off by you just telling me a little bit about your career, your history, and how you got into journalism.
When I was a kid, there were two professions that I wanted to choose from. I either wanted to be a journalist or a veterinarian. I love animals.
Oh,
And I
yes.
was raised in the Bronx. My mom actually enrolled me in zoology classes at the Bronx Zoological Society. So every Saturday morning, I'd get up, take the bus, actually two buses to go to the Bronx Zoo. And I got to hang out with animals and zoologists and listen to their talks. And I just absorbed this. I loved it. But I also love writing. And as a
Hmm.
journalist, I get to ask questions, I get to meet people. And I can cover a wide range of topics. I mean, there are some topics I will stay away from. I don't write about technology or finance. Those are not my strong suits. But I love everything having to do with health. It just doesn't get boring. And I am from New York. I'm proud of my New York roots. But when I graduated college, I couldn't get a job as a journalist. And I had freelance for different publications, weeklies. So I sent out like 100 resumes. And one publication in Franklin, Louisiana, which when I say South Louisiana, if I was any off, I'd be in the bayou. They offered me a job. I went down and I wrote for the daily newspaper down there, and I stayed there for about a year and a half, and came back to New York because I was homesick. And I've been I worked for a trade for a while,
Hmm.
covering home furnishings. I wrote a lot about interior design, which is nice, but it gets old for me after a while. Whereas health, oh, excuse me,
No
um,
problem.
health just never there's always something new to learn. And that's the thing about
Hmm.
journalism. I consider it continuing education.
Hmm.
It's wonderful. I love it. I started after I was left the trade publication. I started freelancing for various local New York magazines and newspapers, and I wrote for a while for the New York Daily News. I got to do some travel writing, which is like one of the best
Nice.
things somebody can do because you get to travel and write about where you've been. And as I said, with health, just talking to people about what what's new, and
Uh-huh.
it covers just so many things. It covers autism, it
Hmm.
covers aging, it covers everything. So that does not get boring. And
And
right now,
so, I'm sorry. And you said autism. So that reminded me, you told me before the podcast that your son is on the spectrum. So talk about a little bit about raising an autistic son.
he is going to be 25 this month. So back then, when we found out, like 22 years ago,
Yeah.
that he had autism. We didn't know what it was. It was the
Hmm.
information wasn't as readily available as it is today. And luckily, he's not at the far end. He goes to college. He
Hmm.
wants to be a therapist and work with kids. So we'll see if he still wants to do that. But it was challenging. But once you learned, and I was very lucky, had a lot of great physicians that we worked with and got him all the necessary help he needed. And he's doing
Hmm.
well, thank goodness. But I've always been
Hmm.
interested in it because of his friends as well. And it's a spectrum. So you get
Yeah.
everybody. It's a wide variety of issues. And it can be challenging, but it can also be a lot of fun. He's a great. I'm very lucky. We're yesterday we picked him up from college, and it's like he's
Okay.
home for a month. We're
Yay.
happy about that.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
tell me a little bit about what is your favorite story or your favorite experience that you had in the journalism career?
I write a lot about animals. I'm happily married, but I fell in love with this one person that I interviewed just because of what he does. I interviewed a guy who he is a professional musician. He plays in
Uh,
Mostly Mozart in New York City, and he also plays on Broadway in the orchestra for musicals. But on his days off, Monday, the theaters are usually closed in New York.
mm-hmm.
He would go down to the ASPCA. And at the ASPCA, the main branch where and you can go to adopt animals, but there's another building around the corner in the 90s on the east side that is open to the public. That's where the ASPCA rescues dogs that have been sadly abused. And he goes and he plays his violin for them. And they listen so attentively and watching
Oh,
them do this. Because, there are programs where you could read to animals at shelters, but he plays. I mean, this is a professional musician playing for them. So
oh,
that's
how
one of my favorites.
beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. So I get to talk to a lot of good people that help people in the health fields. I
Yeah.
did a story about children's books because my mom, she just turned 94 a couple of days ago, and
Wow.
she's showing signs of dementia. And she was a reader. Reading in our house was very, very important. But when you have dementia, it's hard to read. And a book like mine, where there's a bunch of words on the page, that's overwhelming. Any book like that. But children's picture books is another story. There are
Yeah.
pictures, there's big headlines, copy is broken up. And I spoke to some scientists about working with people with autism, and we were talking about how giving somebody in the beginning part of dementia with that has trouble focusing a children's book or a specialty magazine. Maybe you like gardening or decorating.
Hmm.
If the magazine doesn't have a lot of typed words and is broken up with pictures and big headlines, that is much easier to absorb. And she reads now every time. The other day I went to Barnes and Noble and I looked at a bunch of children's books and I took some home to her so she could read them. Um,
That's
when it
beautiful.
comes to reading, we read everything. I'm not big on romance. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not my genre. I
Yeah.
love history. I love historical fiction, mysteries. I mean, there's so many good books. But for somebody with beginning forms of dementia, a picture book, or as I said, a specialty magazine with not a lot of type, not a lot of words, that
That's,
and she
yeah.
read it. I see her reading, great, and she absorbs it, and she'll tell you what she just read.
Oh, that's
So,
wonderful. I have my mom is has pretty late stage Alzheimer's at this point, but when she
mm,
first, started showing the signs of dementia, unfortunately, one of the first things she lost was the ability to read.
mm,
Because her the sight part of her brain doesn't recognize what she's seeing. She can see perfectly well, but it's not translated in her brain. So if she's looking at a cup, um, she doesn't see a cup, or her brain doesn't tell her it's a cup. It's really odd how that particular disease progresses in individuals. It's not, some things are common and some things are not. And I think that's a
Yes.
fascinating area for continued study. I've been doing obviously a lot of research and a lot of reading about different types of dementia. And three of our four parents have dementia. So it's been very challenging. So tell me
Mhm.
about tell me about why you decided to write your book and tell us about that book.
Well, as I said, I love talking and interviewing people who do amazing things. And a few of my readers said, "Do you know about Mary Anning?" And I did not. She's
Okay.
well known in the UK because that's where she's from.
Oh,
And
okay.
actually, I found a few books about her biographies, two biographies, and I read them, and I thought I really want to know more about her. I mean, at age 12, unearthing a 17-foot fossil was the body, and then later on she found the head. It was separated in the cliffs, and I was really lucky. I have a cousin who lives in outside of London, very close to the Jurassic Coast, and that's why it's called Jurassic Girl, because where Mary Anning grew up and lived all her life was a town called Lyme Regis, and it's part of the Jurassic Coast. So my
Wow.
cousin went there and took pictures of the cliffs. Now, I had in my mind what the cliffs look like, but no, I did not have the right picture because it's huge. It's not, we have beaches in New York that are tiny
Yeah, oh
compared
yeah.
to like the Caribbean. So I mean, the cliffs are huge, and finding something there. And she spent all of her, her days on the beach. Um, and it was kind of dangerous because there were falling rocks, there's the waves, it just
The tide coming
and
in.
also
Oh man.
right. And what she wore, this was in the early 1800s. You're wearing a skirt, a long dress, and boots, and she had her sun hat. But can you imagine climbing something like that in a dress?
No. No.
That's exactly right.
Holy
So,
cow.
mhm.
You would have to
so
be 12 years old to be able to do that.
well, it was her father, Richard Anning, who he was a cabinet maker. I think he did not like his job. And he'd rather be on the beach fossil hunting. That was his love, and he passed that on to Mary.
Oh,
And when she was 5 years old, he gave her his sharp tools like knives. And what parent gives up, knives and sharp tools to a 5-year-old? He would have, it sounded like from my research, he would have done it sooner, earlier when she was like 3, but her mom, who was more of a worrywart, was like, no, we're
yeah.
not giving a 3-year-old. And back then, life was really hard. Mary would have been one of like 11 children. Only 2 children survived, she and her older brother, Joseph.
Oh
But
my
that was
goodness.
what back then. We didn't have vaccines. We didn't have, the medicines that we have today. Um, it was common. It was not uncommon at all. So here was this young girl, and she was out there, rain, shine. She loved doing this. I mean, imagine digging for something and finding, what looks like a rock. You might be lucky, and a part of the fossil might be sticking out. So that's a clue, and what to look for, and finding something that's millions of years old. So she really rejoiced. She loved this, and the fact that she found this, and she did get help from many people in the community because she had to go up on this cliff, and there was a big storm, and that helped wash away some of the rocks. But still,
Hmm.
unearthing this and carrying it down, the man she sold the fossil to was written up in the scientific journals as the discoverer. And of course, I'm sure that must have hurt her. emotionally. And she said, "No, I'm going to prove that it was me." And she did. And that's what the book is about. So I
That's
liked her.
so cool. So
Mhm.
it's written for what age group?
They say my publisher said 7 to 13, but
Oh, how
it,
wonderful.
yeah, I'm the my town where I live in New Jersey. There's a lot of good schools here, and I've given some talks here, and the teachers said, even younger kids can read this, or older
Of
kids.
course.
It's,
Yeah.
but they're like, well, our kids are extremely bright. I'm sure they are. They are, and it can go for a younger audience too. But I thought, here's this 12-year-old that did something pretty remarkable. And a lot of people here in the States don't know her. As I said, they know her in the UK. I think it was 2 years ago. They founded a Mary Anning postage stamp in the UK.
Oh,
So,
wow.
and where she lived, there's the Lyme Regis Museum, and they opened a Mary Anning wing about 3 years ago. So I was very lucky. I got to email questions to the researchers, and they didn't get tired of answering my many, many questions. So
What was the
that's
most
how I got a lot of the
surprising?
info.
What was the most surprising thing you found out about her? Besides the obvious.
Just
What?
her. I mean, she loved reading. She was very good friends with another at the time beginner amateur paleontologist, Elizabeth Philpott, who she moved to Lyme Regis with her family, with her sisters and her brother, and she was came from a wealthy family. She lived on the top of the cliffs, whereas if you at the bottom, unfortunately, even though there's a big amount of width there, her house flooded often, but Elizabeth's house was in a safe area, far away from the ocean, and she had a library of books. And Mary loved to read, like she just loved to read, and she was also a very good artist because she would draw what she found. So that was a way to document that. So I was impressed with that she was this great artist as well.
That's wonderful. So I'm
But
glad
I
that you
thought,
were
can you
able,
imagine?
I'm glad that you were able to bring it to people in the United or the kids in the United States and inspire them. I know that there are a lot of children who love dinosaurs and the whole idea of being
Mhm.
an archaeologist or a paleontologist. My own daughter is a geologist.
Mhm.
And so, she kind of decided during her bachelor's that she would go into geo as opposed to paleontology, but she likes rocks. It's kind of the bottom line of it. She loves finding in the history of, how long ago things were and
Mhm.
what is good for the earth versus what is damaging to the earth and that sort of thing. She loves that. But I'm glad you were able to bring a pioneer, a woman pioneer to
Mhm.
light. That's
And a
amazing.
girl. I mean, if Mary
Yeah.
was in her 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, she was female. So no, the men were in the scientific community. She did have some people there that helped her and believed her
Yeah.
because she was incredibly bright. And
Oh,
back
I'm
then,
sure.
you had to pay for school. Her family was very, very poor. So she brought money in by selling the little trinkets that she would find, the fossils on the beach. I mean, not everything was 17 feet. That was. So she'd find these small, quarter shaped or nickel shaped fossils, and she sold them and brought money and put money on the table. And like the food back then. I mean, every night having porridge for dinner. It just did not sound that appetizing. And beer was and I thought beer, and for families, but it didn't have a high alcohol content, and it was part of the porridge, so it was the alcohol content vanished. But
Yeah.
That's
Wow,
what they.
that's amazing. Well, I'm
Mhm.
glad that you were able to bring it, like I said, to the United States and to kids in that age range, especially. What other projects are you working on now? What's next?
I have a book that's pretty much finished. It's with my agent. It's another historical fiction book about for the same age group. I like middle grade.
Yeah.
It's fun. They ask questions, and when I do go to the schools, the kids, especially the girls, some of them have raised their fists and they're like girl power, and
Yeah.
so they know, which is kind of upsetting that they know they should, they shouldn't be discriminated against. But anyway, the next book hopefully will be about Stubby. Stubby was a American Bull Terrier that was
Oh,
found at a military base at the start of World War One in Connecticut. I don't know if you've heard of him. If you
no, I
go to
haven't.
DC to the American History Museum, yeah, you can actually see Stubby. He's taxidermied, which to me is a little creepy, but
Uh,
that's my opinion. Um, Stubby was adopted by a somebody who joined the army, and J. Robert Conroy, excuse me, and he smuggled him aboard a boat going from the Connecticut area all the way to France. And Stubby saved his troop numerous times. Dogs have a better sense of smell than we
mm,
do, so he could smell the gas from the gas attacks before the soldiers could, and would rouse them
wow.
from the trenches and get them out. He captured a German spy. He was honored by 3 U.S. presidents. I mean, this dog was pretty amazing. And doing the research, I got to go to DC. If you again at the American History Museum there, um, if you apply, you can go, and they have was it some books and scrapbooks and such where you can go and look. And I found they had J. Robert Conroy's scrapbook, so I was able to look through it. And there was like myself and think like 5 or 6 other people that were doing research on books. There was this one guy that was doing research on Duke Ellington, and I was so jealous
Oh,
of him because he was listening to records, early music of, yeah. I mean that to
wow.
me is wonderful. But yeah, so I got to look through Conroy's scrapbook and read some letters that he wrote and get a sense of who he is, both with Jurassic Girl and with that book. Um, they're historical fiction, they're based in fact, but obviously I can't interview the people like I do for a story today. So I made up the dialogue, and I wrote that in the introduction on the first page that
Hmm.
all of the dialogue is made up. I mean, I wish I had a time machine and I could have gone back and
Oh,
interviewed them,
yeah.
but no.
That your curiosity just thrills me, to be honest with you. That is something that unfortunately a lot of people lose.
Hmm.
When they get busy in the middle busyness of life, it seems like you lose that curiosity. And it's so important to keep that because that's where your learning comes from. If you're not curious, then you're not seeking, you're not learning, you're not, putting yourself out there to find new things. And that's why I think a lot of people just really get stuck in um, old habits and, you know, uh, they never question what they think or they never explore new ideas or new opportunities. And I'm glad that you are doing that and you're showing us that we can do it too. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Yeah, it's fortunate if you can find a profession that you love.
Yeah.
And I love being a journalist. I know my field has changed immensely since when I started,
Oh,
but I'm not going to get into
yeah.
the politics of it. But to have that curiosity to talk to people, to be able to ask them questions and to find out.
Mhm.
Right now, I'm doing something about trauma, a story on trauma in rehearsal spaces for musicians. And
Oh, wow.
as a conductor, you can pick up if somebody is having an issue in your group, and so they can perform better. Because I would believe that if you're going through something rough, that can definitely stall the creative process.
Oh, for sure. Well, it can stall any person in any performance,
Mhm.
musical, creative, whatever it is. And the good leaders can pick up on if there's something that's not part of the actual work, but is part of the life, and they can pay attention to that. That makes them much better leaders, I think. Okay. So I have three questions that I
I
end
do too.
with every episode. My first one is if you can close your eyes very briefly.
Mhm.
Okay. And
Okay.
describe what you see in your mind's eye when I say wise woman.
I see a lot of colors. I see a lot of purples and greens. I'm seeing just like a whole mismatch of colors. That's what I'm seeing.
Mm.
As far as the visual. I mean, if you want to know what I would think, that would be different. But,
I
um,
love that.
and I think of purple. I think of purple and green, obviously nature, but I think of purple as a female color. I don't,
Yes.
that's it's just a color, but
Well, it
there's an
denotes
old poem
royalty.
that I read. Mhm. Yeah, no, there was an old poem that I read years ago, and it stayed with me. When I was an old woman, I will wear purple. So it's
Yes.
one of my favorite
Actually,
colors.
the funny thing is, that was my grandmother's favorite poem. And we read that at her
Mm.
funeral.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites as well. Okay,
Mhm.
so my next question, where do you like to roam?
Oh, that's really easy. Like, you know, um, I am in a small town outside of New York. I'm about 40 minutes, 45 minutes from New York without traffic. I have to emphasize
Yeah,
that. There are lots of parks. Being in the park, walking. If I am lucky, I get to see different birds. I get to see deer. Just being out in nature, I love that. And then on the other hand, I like also going to museums,
yeah,
art museums. My mom was an art teacher, so art was very important growing up and still is. So those are the
that's
two.
beautiful. My final question, what makes you restless, but in a good way?
In a good way. Maybe some music where you want to get up and move. That's
Yeah,
that's a good way. Yes.
that is great. I love that. No one's had that answer.
Oh, okay. No,
I
I love
love that
music.
answer.
And I like pretty much all kinds, I'd say. Most, I like a lot of different kinds of music.
Oh, well, thank you. How can people get a hold of you and or buy your book?
Go ask for it at your local bookstore, bookshop.org. Let's see, Books a Million. There are a lot of online book stores, and
Okay.
or you're actually, if there is, we are very lucky. We have a brand new children's bookstore in the town that I live in, and there's one that I can walk to in the next town that's for everybody, it's all ages. Or you could also ask for it at your local library.
Perfect. Well, Michelle, thank you. Thank you. By the way, my sister's name is also Michelle with one L.
Oh,
So it was great to see you. Thank you
thank
for
you.
being on the show. And folks, I will put a link in the show notes so that you'll be able to go and take a look at her book. Her books, hopefully the next one will be out pretty shortly. It sounds wonderful. I can't wait to read about Stubby. And
Mhm.
we will talk to all of you later. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you. Okay.
Julie Noonan here. Thank you so much for listening to Roaming with Restless Women. If you're a successful senior woman leader who would like to be on this program, please visit podcast.intuitivewisdomcoach.com. If you enjoyed this interview, please share this episode on social media and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Your thumbs ups and reviews go a long way.